Hey, what's going on, everybody? We are out here in Blue Ridge, Georgia. We're here to visit the grave of, actually two graves, and we're talking about some family. We're here to talk about Mr. Buell Stanley. And the reason he has two graves is he was fishing with dynamite, and I guess he didn't have the fuse long enough, and it blew off his good hand, as he said. So we're here to visit both of those graves, and we're going to talk a little bit about the family that moved into this area originally. They were some of the first family to settle in this part of Georgia. So yeah, with all that said, if this is your first time here, hey, I hope you enjoy the content. Please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, doing all those things. And if this isn't your first time here, welcome back. I hope you enjoy the video. This is a beautiful, it's got a great view behind me, like of the mountains and everything here. It's like the foothills, right, of the Appalachians. We'll talk a little bit about the church. We'll go visit the other grave. We'll visit the arm that's here. So stick around. I hope you enjoy the video. I'm going to get this camera turned around, and we'll talk a little bit about the Stanleys and all the stuff that happened to them as a family and all that stuff. So yeah, let me quit talking. Let's turn this camera around. So before we talk about Buell, let's talk about Alicia. Now, as you know, a country redneck from Alabama sometimes pronounces things and says things wrong. So if these names are wrong, feel free to let me know in the comments. Alicia established this valley. The creek that the settlement is built on is named after Alicia. He was a hard-working farmer with a family and community to care for. In the late stages of the Civil War, the Confederate Army was desperate for men and showed up at his front door to conscript him and his brother-in-law, Elv Evans Hughes, into the rebellion. Neither men were too keen on this idea, as they didn't want to fight in a war for the Southern Army, as historically written. The current caretaker, Ralph, had said, "Our people were on the Union side." The men kept going AWOL, leaving camp and coming home to work their fields and provide for the families. Their crops didn't stop for war, and their women and children were not going to go hungry. Because of this, the two men were hunted down by the Confederate Army. And on September 6th, 1864, Alicia was on his porch repairing his 6-year-old son, his son's shoe, when the Army came calling. Without hesitation, Alicia was shot 6 times while his son and pregnant wife watched. The Army then found Elv in a field shearing sheep. With a pleading wife, they tied him to a horse. That's how you know you're in the country. Drug him away to the camp where he was tied to a tree, and he was shot dead. The wives had no men left to bury their bodies, and it was hard labor to dig the holes. So the two men were buried in the same plot. The women used a corn box used to feed the horses as a coffin. They placed one man in, covered him with a sheet, and laid the other on top. Today a new headstone shows those buried there as family, as the plaque states. So I wanted to acknowledge these first, because they're the first ones, right? First ones buried here. Like they started the cemetery. In 1886, the church that you see up on the hill was built near the homestead, and like most churches in that area, it served as a schoolhouse, a gathering place, as well as a place of worship, of course. The church started as Baptist, but when the Church of Christ members showed up, a great debate started, and the current preacher, who was the Baptist, knew less scripture than the Church of Christ minister, and that settled that. The preacher was sent packing, and from that point on, they were Church of Christ here. From what we can tell, the Stanleys came to this region from North Carolina, as a lot did, and a few married the Cherokee tribe members that had also moved into the Creek territory. After the Trail of Tears started, the natives that had married into white families were safe from the Army and were allowed to stay. The Stanley family built a village in a hollow and began to thrive, raising sheep, cows, horses, and growing crops. So let's get to the man of the hour, shall we? Buell Stanley. You know, fishing with dynamite in a creek, you kind of get what you get, right? So here's the arm right here, the arm of Buell Stanley, amputated in 1915, caused by fishing with dynamite in the river below Stanley Cemetery. His body is buried at Macedonia Church of Christ. So right now, let's head over to Macedonia and I'll show you the rest of the body. So here it is, right here. There's the rest of him. What didn't get blown off is buried right here at the Church of Christ. And there's his wife right there. It says, see, right there, D.B. Stanley. And there's his wife. And there's so many other Stanleys too. There's a whole bunch. We're going to cut back to the other cemetery here in a second. See, Stanley, World War I. That's a unique one. Rarely see World War I's. You got a few Baileys mixed in, and then Stanley, 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 and then the baby Stanley. So yeah, all right, we're cutting back to the cemetery now. All right, so there's the body. Now we're back here at the Stanley Church of Christ. As you can see, it's a beautiful church. Right up there. Might walk up there in a minute and say hello to the fellow that's here. Let him know I'm not here to cause no trouble. Just here to kind of, report on stuff. And so when I was through, he waved me over and said, hey, come up the hill. So I come up the hill, and it turns out he's the second or third cousin or nephew or something like that to Buell. I can't remember how that went. But he confirmed that the dynamite did happen. He said that Buell had a half a stick of dynamite. He lights the dynamite and the fuse goes out. So Buell thinking, well, he puts it on a rock. He said he walked into the woods and he waited for a while. Dynamite never went off. So Buell thinks that the dynamite went out. He goes over to grab it, and as soon as he picks up the dynamite, that's when it blows up in his hand. So yeah, it was nice to meet him. Great guy. I didn't ask him if he wanted to be on camera. Some people get weird about that stuff, especially the older generation. They're like, what do you want me to be on camera for? And it turns into a whole thing. So I didn't ask, but I'm glad I met the man. Seems like a great guy. It's a beautiful place. So yeah, let's get back into the video and we'll finish talking about Mr. Stanley. Oh, and he's the guy that put the little thing that we look at. He's the man that put it there. So he's got a lot invested into it. So back to the video. So yeah, how about that, right? How about that? Blew his arm off with dynamite. Like, how crazy? That's insane, right? Like, you always hear that growing up, like fishing with dynamite and stuff, but I never heard anybody talk about losing an arm. Just kind of at all at the amount of the Stanleys, like, because there's a lot. Let me walk this way. There's more Stanleys. There's like Stanleys everywhere, but these are like newer generation Stanleys, not the ones that we're here to see. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, doing all that stuff. If you're still with me, thanks for watching. I can't thank you guys enough. Like all the Patreon, or not Patreon, but the members. We have Patreon, PayPal, we got the merch, we got merch, and we got all the things, right? Like, I can't thank you guys enough for supporting and, helping the channel out. And that way you and I can go to these places and visit graves of people that blew their arm off with dynamite, right? Like, how nuts is that? So yeah, thanks for watching. You know what? You never know what you're going to find on the back roads. I'll see you guys next time.